The last 2 years of non-stop Israeli genocide has exposed much. It's exposed Zionism. It's exposed Western and Arab complacency and repression. And most of all, it's exposed centrists who cower and deny the genocide, who deny and shun Palestinian suffering. Centrists who claim Palestine is complicated while spewing out liberal Zionist talking points. I might sound like a broken record at this point, but there is no good Zionism. Each and every Zionism is vile.
俺に勝てる可能性でもあるのか!
生きてんだから無限にあんだろ!
For the last 2 years, as Israel continues its brutal genocide against Palestinians, centrists have stood mostly silent. Whenever they're provoked or pushed to speak, they often say, Palestine is complicated. There's so much nuance to unpack here with genocide. There's so much nuance with this case of blatant settler colonialism.
People in Europe, the media in Europe talks about post-colonial situation. There's no post-colonial in Palestine. Palestine is colonial, still colonial. In the 21st century, they're still colonizing the country. It's the only country on earth which is really colonizing now, openly, with the support of the Americans. Unless we present Palestine properly, unless we use the right language, unless we use the right discourse, we're not going to make much progress.
ContraPoints and Philosophy Tube, these big bread tube names, are not ignorant. They're playing into liberal settler colonial denial. There's this long norm in Western academia where we're told to look at both sides, to understand both sides, to think about the feelings of the colonizers. Look at these white people. Don't you feel sad that they tormented indigenous children? Look at these white people butcher and massacre indigenous peoples. Don't you feel sad that they had to do this? In this colonial framework of studying both sides, colonialism, violence, the massacres, the torture, the theft of land, the displacement, and ethnic cleansing is made to seem complicated. But as an indigenous person, I can kindly say, fuck that. Fuck this colonial bullshit. On the other hand, you have the very vocal centrists and fascist grifters like Ethan Klein, Lonerbox, Destiny, and Asmongold, who justify Israel's genocide, who work day in and day out spewing Israeli propaganda, spewing Islamophobia and pure hate. Just vile human beings. I'm here not only to say the obvious, that Palestine isn't complicated, but that people need to stop erasing indigenous and Palestinian history. Even if erasure is attempted, the colonized will always remember the violence inflicted on them, and they will never stop resisting. So if you're a true Ethan Klein hater like I am, you should subscribe, join my crew, become my son. I'm looking for 10,000 pirates to raise a Palestinian flag of resistance. And if you have money, make sure you donate to the Samir Project. The Samir Project is attempting to fight Israel's siege and try to rebuild Gaza. And they need all the help they can get. Part 1. The Eternal Now. There are some historians out there who ignore and caution against studying the history of the present. The present is said to be the realm of archivists and journalists. The present is too muddy to be studied, too biased. There's too much information out there to piece together a history. There are other historians out there who gaze at the present and use it as an anchor to tie or challenge historiography. I respect those historians. But for colonized people, the present becomes an eternal now. Noor Masallah, a Palestinian historian, a man who fought against liberal Zionist historians, stresses in his book The Palestinian Nakba, the future of Palestinians seems to be lost. Palestinians living in occupied Palestine or in Syrian or Jordanian or Lebanese refugee camps are trapped in limbo. in an eternal now. Some might say Palestinians should just forget and forgive their genocidal Nazi colonizers and move on. But living inside an eternal now, holding onto memories of violence and genocide, is a way of resisting Israeli colonialism. Time may have stopped in 1948, but Palestinians have been moving forward and they've been resisting for 77 years. What some people don't understand is that Palestinians are trying to create a future without their colonizers present. In the present 2 years of Israeli genocide, cowardly academics have begun to slither out writing articles that actually, you know what, Israel is committing a genocide. But some of these academics aid the colonizers with their condemnations of the Islamic resistance. There are some people out there who speak of surrender, who peddle the liberal Zionist myth of a two-state solution, that this genocide would end if the Islamic resistance surrenders. The Palestinians who are being starved and bombed to death would be saved by Israel, or the bootlicking Palestinian Authority. That peace can only be achieved with diplomacy. Isn't that great? What a fucking lie. Back when I was in Masters, I was obsessed with theories. Lost futures, severance, temporality, affect, hauntology, etc., etc. These theories became foundations for my historical essays, but each and every one of them peered into what normal people felt when experiencing colonization, land theft, an erasure of history, and being in a state of limbo, where at a certain point of history, time stops, and there is an eternal now. The future seems to be lost. Palestinians have been living in an eternal now for over 77 years, and their history has been largely ignored. It's been pushed aside, muted, silenced, as the focus has been on Jewish voices and narratives. The present changes this. Historians can no longer look away, and archives are now being filled with Israeli Nazi war crimes. The archives are being filled with images and videos of starvation, of children being maimed and murdered, of rape, of torture, ethnic cleansing, mass bombings, torn and demolished buildings, of journalists and people being burnt alive, of last words, of pleas for help, screams for help. The archives are being filled with Israeli Nazi hate speech, speech that wants those fucking Arabs eradicated, of speech that calls all Palestinians Islamic terrorists. But the archives are filled with every Nazi war crime that can be imagined. While these archives get flooded, the crimes, the massacres, and the butchering of Palestinians never ceases. One can easily get desensitized, feel nothing, an emptiness, absolute dread and doom. Yet Palestinians in Gaza scream, "We are still alive." The brave fighters on the ground continue to fight and struggle. For the Israelis, that must be haunting. It must be haunting for the Israelis to see that the Palestinian liberation movement can't be deterred or silenced or bombed out of existence. And yet in the present, there are countries who've come to recognize a Palestinian state. I've seen some people celebrate this, but all they're doing is calling for a two-state solution, which is a pure liberal Zionist myth. In this imagined two-state solution, Palestinians are completely defanged and subservient to their Israeli colonizers. The Palestinian Authority is proof of this. What the UK, France, and Canada want is a Zionist Palestinian state. What they want is for Palestinians to surrender. This is a textbook colonial move that aids the Israeli genocidal state because it pins the genocide not on Israel, but on Hamas, on Palestinians. It's a colonial move that wishes to pacify Palestinians, to make them behave. Ghassan Kanafani has written extensively of what peace with Israel means. Peace talks with the Israelis is like a sword to the neck. I hope Israelis understand that they won't have peace until their genocidal ethno-state is erased off the face of the earth. What's important now, in the present moment, is to have what Fanon wrote about, psychological fortitude. The resistance on the ground, the men who are fighting the butchers of Gaza, understand Fanon's words. They understand what the Algerians went through, and yet despite the massacres, the torture, and the piles of skulls, Algeria was liberated. Someday, Palestine will be liberated too. What's important now, for us, those living in the belly of the beast, to have is a psychological fortitude, because fascism is here, and the fascist pigs expect us to surrender, to kneel, to give up on the fight and the struggle for liberation. What they don't know is that those who fight for liberation will not stop resisting until a better and peaceful future is created. One that isn't lost. It's October 7th, and I'm still here. I'm still fighting and struggling in this eternal now, alongside my Palestinian and Sudanese comrades. Winona Wheeler, an indigenous scholar who focuses on archives, oral history, and the erasure of memory, called onto Fanon to explain colonial alienation. Colonialism is not satisfied merely with holding a people in its grip and emptying the native's brain of all form and content. By perverted logic, it turns the past of the oppressed people and distorts, disfigures, and destroys it. Wheeler concludes this from her analysis of Fanon and the Zionist Albert Memmi's words. No one can deny that the experience of colonization is traumatic. Displacements, depopulation, alienation, powerlessness, demoralization, internalized hatred. The forces of colonialism not only rape the land, they violently assault the body, spirit, and mind of the colonized. Wheeler's article, written and published in Turtle Island, is deeply tied to Noor Masallah's book, The Palestinian Nakba. The heart of Masallah's book is memoricide, the Zionist attack against Palestinian history and memory, the attempt to rewrite Palestinian history, to rewrite it with a colonial Zionist narrative, while making every attempt to delegitimize Palestinian history of genocide. The colonizer in every colony attempts to place their narrative, their fake-ass history, as unquestionable truth. The colonial history thus becomes mainstream. It's the history that's taught in schools and universities. Palestinian history becomes a history of the unrational, unreasonable, fanatic Islamic terrorist. Liberal Zionist myth and lies riddle this colonial history. Why won't the Palestinians or the fucking Arabs accept peace? Why do these fucking Arabs continue to attack Jews? Why can't these fucking Muslims tolerate other religions? Or the narrative spins a so-called holy war. The fucking Muslims are all terrorists. They want to kill all the Jews in the Holy Land. Being taught the liberal methodologies of history, the history of Palestine might seem complex, because we have to investigate both sides. We have to understand both sides. We have to account and really feel for Jewish settlers. But even if we study the history of Palestine through a liberal Zionist lens, it becomes clear that this is a history of omission and erasure. In his 1988 book, Collusions Across the Jordan, Avi Shleim does a remarkable job exposing the fake-ass Jordanian state and how it betrayed Palestine. But when it comes to the Nakba, Shleim describes it as a war, the massacres, the ethnic cleansing committed by the Haganah that were ordered from the top, the labor Zionists, were according to Shleim committed by far-right rogue extremists. The Nakba, according to Shaleim's early books, did not show a pattern of genocide. This is why if you read Masallah, you'll find him disproving both liberal Zionists like Shaleim and fascist Vladimir Jabotinsky fanboys like Benny Morris. In her 2011 book, False Prophets for Peace, Tikva Honik Parnas does underline the collective socialist foundations of the Zionist settler colonial project. She shows how Zionism is the elder brother of Nazism, and that the labor Zionists wanted to create an exclusively Jewish state. She does a remarkable job exposing the facade of the Oslo Accords and Israel's fake peace. But Palestinians resisting this fascism are not present in her book. In his 2009 book, The Myths of Liberal Zionism, Loar in his introduction does underline the concentration camp and the ghetto of Gaza and the containment and sealing of the West Bank by liberal Zionists. He correctly pins the crime on Israel. Loar does write of genocidal violence and language, of the noticeable silence when it comes to the butchering of Palestinians. But again, his book is focused on his resistance against liberal Zionism, not Palestinians resisting liberal Zionism. At its best, liberal Zionist history exposes Israel. But if we were to trust these historians and seriously study Israeli or Palestinian history, a memoricide becomes apparent. What this all boils down to is a lack of trust in Palestinians and a vile dehumanization. There is, and there always has been, mountains of historical evidence of genocide from Palestinian sources. Sources that detail what happened during the Nakba, the starvation and alienation in the camps, the formation of the resistance towards Zionism and American imperialism, the starvation and the siege of Gaza since 2007. There's a documentary on the brutal occupation of Gaza and the labor or the liberal Zionist attempt to break Palestinians by enforcing a broken bones policy. There's an encyclopedia written by Walid Khadai about Palestinian villages before and after erasure. There have been for years now accounts about torture and rape in Israeli prisons. Yet somehow, these historical truths only become true when Israelis report and write about them. The world came to know about Israel's obsession with rape through the Israeli right to rape riots, where Israeli prison guards and settlers became enraged that they weren't allowed to rape Palestinian prisoners. Palestinians for weeks on end have been telling us that the GHF were setting up kill traps, where Israelis and American soldiers played games shooting Palestinians seeking aid. But people didn't believe Palestinians. It only became truth when an American soldier leaked that Israelis and Americans were hunting Palestinians for sport. This is dehumanization. It is a vile dehumanization. The aim of liberal Zionist propaganda is psychological warfare. It aims to insert a slither of a doubt into Palestinians and those who are fighting for the liberation of Palestine. Liberal Zionists hope and wish and pray that this doubt turns into alienation, and it spawns thousands of Muhammad Abbases and Abdul Fuad al-Khatibs. People who look at this 77-year-long genocide and blame not the Israelis, not the Zionists, not the imperialists, but Palestinians. It's Hamas. It's all Hamas. Liberal Zionist propaganda in the realm of history aims to shoot out as much shit as possible, that it makes people take Zionist historians seriously, that it covers Palestinian history, disfigures and distorts it. I'ma break script with you here and tell you straight up, I suffer tremendously from reading Parnas, Loar, Brenier, Avi Shlaim, and the very sick fucks like Benny Morris and Vladimir Jabotinsky. It was a pain in the ass having to listen to Ethan Klein's whiny-ass Zionist voice and just look at his Nazi terrorist wife. But it pisses me off even more when I see YouTubers seriously cite Haaretz, the Jerusalem Post, and Zionist historians while dismissing Palestinian voices. Read Noor Masalla, read Muhammad al-Kurd, read Fanon, read Ghassan Kanafani and George Habash, read Leila Khalid. Fuck man, Khalid's book is so direct. She doesn't dance around things like liberal Zionist historians. The erasure of Palestinian memory is in reality deeply connected to settler colonial lies. So let's fucking go and trash Philosophy Tube. Philosophy Tube's video, originally titled Rationalizing Colonialism, How the US Stole Indian Land, is in reality a rationalization of the Israeli genocide of Palestinians and the American Holocaust of the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. It takes Abigail 40 minutes to reach the basic premise of settler colonialism, where before she cites a historian, she cites a white YouTuber who has made extremely shitty and ahistorical anti-indigenous videos. Abigail then has to really grapple with the idea that the Americans committed genocide. She doesn't cite indigenous peoples or the Indians. She has to say, personally, I think we can read Jefferson's private letters in particular of statements of intent to destroy. Like, wait, what? Genocide is a matter of interpretation now? Historians famously sat around and debated their interpretations of Nazi or Turkish genocidal intent. No. The 1492 American Holocaust, the Holocaust, the Armenian Genocide, the 2003 Darfur Genocide, the 2023 Sudanese Genocide, and the 77 years of Israeli genocide of Palestinians is fact. They are historical fact. Interpretation is a tool used by genocide denialists who deny historical truths, evidence, and the oral record of the victims. Freda has a great video on Holocaust denial, but this denial exists in Canada and in America regarding the residential schools, where the white supremacist Christian colonizer reads John A. Macdonald's or Henry Knox's words and doesn't interpret the clear genocidal intent of wanting to kill the Indian in the child. Because to the white supremacist colonizer, civilizing the Indian is a positive thing. This matter of interpretation, this matter of grappling with what a white man, with what Thomas Jefferson wrote, leads Philosophy Tube to say, you may have heard of people describe Israel as a settler colonial state, or as genocidal. What she's saying here is tied to how she analyzes history, that some people believe Israel is settler colonial, that some people believe Israel is committing genocide. This is genocide denial. And Abigail goes even further with the fact that we have to listen and read and care about Israeli scholarship to determine if this is genocide. Not Palestinians, the Israeli genocidal settler historians, because we also have to always factor in, before making anything on Palestine, global anti-Semitic hate crimes. This video is thus serving us a duality of genocide denial. In his book, The American Holocaust, the historian David Stannard doesn't hesitate. He doesn't pull any punches. He doesn't try to be a centrist, saying, we have to analyze both sides here. We have to try and rationalize the millions of deaths white Christian Europeans brought when they invaded the so-called New World. Nah. Stannard in his introduction calls it a Holocaust that continued after the settler colonial states formed. He doesn't believe European colonists had genocidal intent because he researched and found European and American openly stating their intent and left records of their genocidal crimes. Stannard, in retrospect, is pushing back against genocide denial and settler colonial narratives. He's pushing back on myths that say, the Indians just vanished. They disappeared. Where did the Indians go? They're going extinct. Stannard is connecting the 1492 American Holocaust to Nazi Germany. The American genocidal colonialism inspired the Nazis, and in the present, the Israelis. Although Philosophy Tube does bring up denial, she doesn't really understand what it is and how she's complicit of it.
Says it's not always like that. Sometimes genocide involves a mix of actors at the state and individual level, official actions, plus a little bit of looking the other way. Sometimes it involves denial or non-performative statements to help it along through the less active phases.
Denial is when the settler lies become the norm, where the settler denies indigenous peoples of their history, and a new settler narrative replaces indigenous history and stories. Denial becomes reality because the settler always wishes to replace the native, to become the new native in both memory and place. Denial isn't just something that manifests in historical narratives, but it becomes an active component, an active weapon that is used against indigenous peoples. Denial is present in the archives, in commemoration and celebrations, in the act of renaming places. Denial is carved into the land with the plow and bulldozers. The Israeli colonial case shows this hijacking, as according to the Israeli scholars, Zionism isn't colonial. It's a national liberation movement. Jewish people have a 3,000-year right to Palestine. Sorry. Jewish Europeans are indigenous to the land of Palestine. When Israel was established, there was this heavy push to cement Israelis as the new natives, and Palestinians were just some Arab foreigners. I bet you've heard this one. Palestine was just another barren, empty land, and Zionist settlers made the desert bloom. Palestine? Palestine? There never was a Palestine. It's always been Israel. And finally, there were no Palestinians. That's something that was made up in the 1960s. They're just Arabs. Fucking Arabs. When this denial and the lies are exposed, people often refer to settler colonial amnesia. But that isn't it. The settler is continuously reminded and haunted by the colonized. The colonized haunts the settler both physically and mentally. Within a settler colonial society, there is always paranoia. The settler has to force themselves to belong. They have to use force to become the new native. They have to carve and burn the land to show the native that it's now their land. They have to kill and massacre and torture and educate the native. All this is rationalized with paranoia, with a continuous, never-ending haunting. In a settler's mind, there is always that possibility that the colonized will stop being perfect victims, that they'll break out of their colonial prisons, rising up, resisting with a violence that burns as hot as cannonballs, a violence that burns the colonial state to the ground. So the colonial state, be it America, Canada, Australia, and Israel, takes an active measure of repression to keep the colonized in their place. The policing and surveillance of indigenous and black bodies is an active force. Should the colonized step back? Should the colonized concede? Should the colonized surrender to this repression? As George Jackson and Frantz Fanon wrote, the repression may be here, but there's no way we're going to step back from the fight. Colonialism won't yield until the knife is at its throat, and Palestinians, black and indigenous peoples will bring a blade to the throat of fascism. The settler may enforce and legitimize their lies and their myths. These lies may become unquestionable truths that are cited routinely by academics and YouTubers. The colonial fascist propaganda machine might spew an unbelievable amount of propaganda at us that it becomes too much to dismantle and debunk. A distraction. But I still think it's useful to set the record straight, to call out colonial fascist ahistorical propaganda and bring light to Palestinian and indigenous voices. But unlike most historians, my eyes are gazing towards the future. To a historian, the future is a dangerous place. It's riddled with too many unknown variables. It's unpredictable and explosive. Most white historians view history as a straight line. Time is an arrow marching. Points in history cement and mark permanent victories over the conquered, and guide towards a defeatist history, a lost future. Indigenous history differs. It's not rigid. Time is circular, and with stories, circles are weaved over and over and over again. Circles of stories that can cover and dance over entire skies with history. circles that bridge past and present. There are many stories about a time before the white or Zionist colonist. There's always a before and after in the history of colonization. There are some stories that have been burnt away, either from the European colonial assaults, where they kidnapped and tortured indigenous children, cutting them from their mother tongues, or from severe trauma, blotching out memory, history, and stories. In the Israeli case, the Zionist settlers burned and bombed Palestinian archives. How many stories, how many precious histories were burnt to ash by these sick fucks? Despite this assault on memory, on history, stories persist, and they're being passed off to the future. I wrote an essay about this in Masters. I thought I was being radical. I called it The Spectre in the Archives. I thought I was being radical by saying that the archives and archival institutions need to be decolonized. But it seems like I forgot that decolonization is always a violent phenomena. The colonized will never forget the violence and the genocide inflicted on them. Massacres. Massacres. The massacres. The endless massacres. Kids being kidnapped and tortured. Kids murdered, buried in cold graves. The missing and murdered women. The rape. Don't expect to see any explosions today. It's too early. Or too late. Decolonization is not a metaphor. Academics may slither out and condemn Israel's genocide, but they'll 100% condemn Palestinian and indigenous resistance. They'll twist Fanon's words, saying that's not what Fanon meant by violence. The best resistance to genocide is non-violence. The best resistance to fascism is dancing around in silly-ass dinosaur costumes. No. Decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. Revolutions are not romantic picnics. They're messy. And resisting fascism is never romantic. The history of the colonized is one of violence and repression. The history of 77 years of Israeli genocide leads to explosions. The role of this bloody history is to guide the colonized towards a liberated future. A future that is tied to the dreams of every Palestinian, every black and indigenous person. It's a future of liberation, a future where the colonized break out of their prisons, escaping from the doomerous, defeatist, colonial lost future. Some people out there may call this dream a fantasy. They may laugh at us. They may condemn our struggle and our fight. But I bet it's a bit haunting that they know that we won't stop fighting until Palestine is free, until Palestine is free, until all of the land of Turtle Island is returned back to indigenous peoples. The history of man, the time is coming. I am convinced when we shall join the ranks of those who are making it. It's October 30th, 2025. In the 22 days since the ceasefire, Israel, the genocidal colonial state, has violated the ceasefire more than 100 times. Does Israel have total and complete impunity because it's the Jewish state? Or is it because of anti-Semitism? Or is it because Palestinians are dehumanized and are seen by the world as just terrorists who deserve to be eradicated? A lot of people have placed doubts in this ceasefire, thinking they know better than the Palestinian resistance. But I have been partially celebrating what the resistance has accomplished. Not only did it expose the Zionist entity, but it has freed 1,700 Palestinian hostages from Israeli torture and rape dungeons. Palestinians in Gaza have some relief, but even with a ceasefire, the genocide continues, and so does our struggle for the liberation of Palestine. This is when genocide denial starts, when liberal Zionist propagandists slither out and try to redeem Israel. Some will say, it's Netanyahu. Israel is peaceful. It loves peace. Others will dehumanize Palestinians and have already been saying, Israel did not commit and has not been committing genocide. It's all Hamas and Palestinian propaganda. It's Pallywood. It's all fake. The starvation, the murder of children, the rape of women, and the kidnapping of men was fake. Israelis say this as the IOF kidnaps more Palestinians and continues its siege on Gaza. This is the time when traitors Palestinians and Arab slither out, condemning Palestinian resisting their fascist occupiers. They join Zionist ranks, dehumanizing Palestinians, calling them too barbaric to govern, too barbaric to enforce law and punish ISIS gangs who aided the genocidal Israelis. They call onto the world to let the Palestinian Authority govern Gaza, because Hamas doesn't want peace with genocidal Israel. What these traitors want is a defanged Palestinian people who are subservient to Zionism. Let it be known to the Zionists out there that all of Israeli society is hell-bent on genociding Palestinians. Even if the Palestinian Authority kisses and licks Israel's ass, the West Bank is under military occupation, subjected to daily raids, with new settlements springing up every day. If the resistance surrendered and did not fight back, Gaza would be an Israeli settlement. But it isn't, and it will never be. Let it be known that Zionism is not a peaceful ideology. It's an expansionist, settler, colonial, fascist ideology. Israelis have been attacking southern Lebanon for over a year with a ceasefire. They've been attacking and raiding and besieging the West Bank, and they will continue to starve and bomb Palestinians in Gaza. Zionism is not peaceful, and Israelis will never have peace. Israelis may fascistically dream of a peace where Palestinians are eradicated and completely ethnically cleansed, but as long as Palestinians fight back, they will continue to haunt the Israeli settlers. It's October the 30th, and Gaza is still alive. The Palestinian struggle for national liberation is still alive. To my comrades out there who are giving into despair and dread, push those feelings aside and let's make some history. Palestine will be free, and Israel will cease to exist. Palestine isn't a lost future, as long as people continue to fight with their bitter strength and their last drops of blood. Hey, welcome to the end of the video. If you enjoyed what you watched, make sure to subscribe and hype the video. My question to you is, how do we fight genocide denial? Please check the links in the description and donate to the Samir Project or Ahmed Sansour or Lifelines for Gaza. Winter is coming and Palestinians in Gaza don't have shelters, there's flooding, and people are suffering from the cold. Or you can pressure your governments to lift the siege. Please don't give me any of your money. Maybe cancel your subscription to ContraPoints or Nebula and donate that money to help Palestinians. Centrist historians and PhilosophyTube lack a backbone. The Holocaust actually opened a historical debate about methodology, where some historians said, we can't judge the Nazis. Historians should be objective, unbiased, and not judgmental. We're talking about Nazi freaks. These debates were silenced by one of the most legendary historians at the time, Eric Hobsbawm. Hobsbawm and David Stannard took the stance that when it comes to genocide, you have to stand your ground. Centrist historians want you to think about it. They want you to fall into the trap that there's multiple interpretations of what Thomas Jefferson and Hitler wrote. No, there is clear evidence of both written genocidal intent and genocidal actions of the American or Nazi or Israeli state. Most historians spend months and years in archives researching historical evidence of genocide. When they emerge wiping that archival dust off. They've assembled evidence of these historical crimes. So I'm sorry that I messed up and misquoted PhilosophyTube. Please, for the love of God, don't sue me over that mistake. But I must say, when you're talking about genocide, please do not make stupid ass Eminem jokes. Don't try and be all fancy and pretentious and throw presentism at us. Colonization is continuing. It is continuous. It is ongoing. And I personally found it offensive that you would dare to go from a serious topic like genocide. We're talking about the mass killing and massacres of millions, the erasure of culture and language, to, oh, I wonder what Thomas Jefferson would think about the different flavors of M&Ms. Ha 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 ha. Typical colonial British bullshit. This video, my video, also lacks a serious discussion about residential school denial. Fascist white Canadians have been screeching, saying, "Show us the bodies." Some are proud of this cultural genocide, of Canada's cultural genocide, as they claim and attest and keep on saying, keep on being fucking white racists, that they civilized the Indian. To those white fascist Canadians, those white, super white Canadian colonizers watching, please read all the TRC reports. The final report talks about the missing children and the children who were murdered and buried in those cold graves. For masters, I had to read all of the TRC reports, and they scarred me. I also want to deeply apologize if my voice sounds rough. I recorded the main part of this video after recovering from a cold, so yeah, sorry, so sorry about that if my voice is shitty. I'll try my best next time to make my voice not shitty and better. Okay, enough of the grim. Here are my 2026 predictions. Either ContraPoints or PhilosophyTube will make a 5-hour centrist video on Palestine, calling it The Truth About Israel, where they talk about Israel for 4 hours and 55 minutes, and the Palestinians for 5 minutes. Or they won't make anything, and remain to be nebula cowards. In 2026, I will hit 10k. I know I said this last year, but inshallah, God willing, I will hit 10,000 subscribers. It's gonna be magical. It's gonna be like, wow, oh my god, I had 20 subscribers and now I have 10k. Wow, oh my god, what's going on? My final prediction is that Loki in One Piece will join the crew. If a giant doesn't join, I'ma call Oda racist. Okay, Oda, if you don't want the racist allegations, you better put a giant on that crew. Okay, I want to see Loki. I don't care how he fits. I don't care how you fit him. He's got to be on the crew. Okay, I want Loki. I want Loki joining the crew. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry that this video came out so late. I was sick. I was totally not gaming and pushing this video aside every single week. I had depression, okay? I swear to God, I have depression. I'll try my best next year. Always and forever remember, free Palestine, free Sudan, and fuck the UAE, fuck Saudi Arabia, fuck Israel, and fuck the RSF, fuck the IDF. Okay, peace. Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. Bye. This is the end. This is the end. You gotta go.